Thank you, Martin. I am going to quickly talk a little bit about e-learning unlocked to explain why I have two cameras pointing at me. It's not that I'm that vain that I just like to capture my every moment. As Martin said, e-learning unlocked is a 12-month project designed specifically for charities, and it takes people from the very beginning of what is instructional design and what are the principles, right through the 7 units into evaluation. Those of you that passed your GCSE maths will recognise that there are 7 units in 12 months. That is because some units are bigger than others. So the smallest is 1 month, but some of them are 2 months. When we came up with the idea, one of the things that Martin and I talked about was streaming any session that I did at a members meeting to where we were in the programme, so that anyone who's completing the programme will have that access. But also anyone who's not a member but is a charity or is not able to attend, we're videoing them so that they can then have those live sessions as well. So we are currently in designing learning, and so my session is going to be around the kind of creative aspect of designing e-learning. We have 2 people on e-learning unlocked today. We can head away for. If you're interested in 2025, that is the hope, the plan, to run it again. On the feedback forms, there is a box to tick. If you tick that, we will add you to a small mailing list. You will only receive updates, and then once it's gone live, we'll delete that list. So it'll only be to stay in touch with where we release dates. But if you're interested and want to talk to either people doing the programme or any of my team, can you wait, team? That's you, Jen? Yep. Then feel free. I've actually brought the workbook for the current unit with me in case you're interested. Okay, so I want to go through with you the process that we use to take an idea or a topic or something that's come to us, maybe we've had a client who said, we need some data protection training, right through to we come up with an idea for that course, we've come up with some goals, and then kind of what are we going to design in terms of the output. So I'm not getting into the technicalities of creating e-learning, but that kind of creative process before you get into your authoring tool. Now, my focus is going to be about kind of rich interactive e-learning, but you can apply many of the principles that we're going to be looking at to creating course pages, so some of the things that we've kind of just looked at. This is the process that we use in terms of the nuts and bolts of the steps that we take. So we start off at the very beginning with a kickoff meeting, and then we go through all of these stages right through until we hand over for launch. Don't worry, we worry about accessibility all the way through. That's when we're doing our testing and enhancements. It's not that we haven't planned it throughout. So at the very beginning, it's about getting your foundations right. So it's about talking to the key stakeholders, the subject matter experts, the potential learners, and really having that discussion with them about what's needed. A data protection course is that's just a title. What we need to understand is what the problems are, what the goal is. And so that's our opportunity to dig down into that. And then the output of that is a source document. Now, this is what happens when you get geeks to build your slides for you. So I'm going to focus just on this bit here. We've had our kickoff meeting. We've really got to grips with everything that we understand that is needed. And then the output of that is this source. And the source is, for us, often just a PowerPoint document, nothing fancy. And it's just this the kind of brain dump from your subject expert of everything that they think should be covered in that module. Now, what you'll get, this, I have to say, I didn't pick this one on purpose. This looks really pretty, this side. That's our source document. Often they look absolutely atrocious and they're dumps of everything and whatnot. But the point is, how do you, as a learning professional, take that and come up with that? And this is what we're going to look at in the middle, that magic source that takes just a bunch of information and turns it into a rich experience that's going to meet a goal, not just deliver some e-learning. And when we were putting these slides together, Jen was like, are you sure you've got the right source? Because there's no hotel content, that says hotel, in this module. And that's because what we want to do is focus on a goal, not a topic, but our subject expert is focused on a topic, not necessarily their goal. So what we need to do is focus on that goal, and then how do we think we're going to go from 0 to meeting that goal, that objective, and then drawing from this the content that we need to do that. And sometimes that means content isn't going to meet our goal, and sometimes that means we don't have content that will help us. So it's not about just saying, okay, here's what the subject expert wants me to produce training on. Okay, I'll just make those slides really pretty and whizzy and interactive, and then I've done my job. Our focus is about meeting that goal, making that change happen. So this is the steps that we take. So as a team, we will get together and talk about the requirements, so that goal. How are we going to reach that goal? What does the brand look like? You know, what kind of wiggle have we got within the brand in terms of creativity, in terms of visual representation of what we want? And we'll be thinking about, you know, is it a game? You know, what kind of treatment can we use that will help us reach that goal? And then part of that will be looking at instructional design models. What model do we want to use? And the one that we use probably the most often is this model. Does anybody recognize this? So this is action mapping by a lady. You can't see because of the thing, but anyway, her name is Kathy Moore. If you're interested, if you just Google action mapping, her website is still live. She's not really running it, but it's still full of really useful resources. I also delivered a session on action mapping at the London members meeting. There is a video, but that is also publicly available, so you don't need to be on Elearning Unlocked. I'll give Amber a link to put into the Digital Good Deed bag if you're interested in watching this and learning more about this. It's a really useful, practical, pragmatic approach. But the point of this is that you start with your measurable goal. I don't know how many times I've said goal so far. And then you think about what behaviours do people need to demonstrate so that we as an organisation can meet that goal. Then what activities can they do in a learning intervention that will help them to change that behaviour to meet that measurable goal? And then finally, what information do they need to be able to do the activity to change the behaviour? And so you can see why I was kind of labouring this point of you're not taking just source information from your expert and creating the e-learning based on that. Your focus is on here, working through these ideas, and then and only pulling in the information you need to design that e-learning. So that's the process that we will be going through as a team to come up with that creative concept. And then what we'll do is we will potentially pull together a mood board based on that conversation, what we're having. This is actually a module that we are working on with Kibble, who aren't here, but it would have been great to let them see this. And it's on trauma for children. And when we were talking to them, they wanted something that looked, you know, was right for the audience, but also something that wouldn't look like old people thought that that was right for the audience, which is a big problem. It's a little old in our team. Well, no, Rosie helped. But also we did want something that would date, you know, so we had conversations around kind of bringing in concepts from TikTok, but then that could be really quickly quite passé and, oh no, can you imagine they've done work? How old are they? So it was a balancing act, but you can see that, you know, Jen pulled together just some different visual representations of how we might bring in the concept of trauma and elements that we would use. And if you saw the module and you saw the mood board, you could probably connect them together because a lot of those kind of visual representation is in. So the idea of a mood board is just, okay, so we want to do something that's kind of fun and, you know, okay, what sort of elements can we use? And then that helps you to identify graphics that you might use in the module itself. So the next stage is, we've had that conversation about what it's going to look like, and then we move into our design phase, and we call this a design session. Now, this is what I want you to have a go at, and we're really lucky because we've got lots of whiteboards, so there's no excuse. In practice, if you struggle with watching sped up video, you might want to look away at this point. But this is a video, it really feels sped up on the whiteboard like this, it's very jumpy. But this is a video of a design session that we're completing. You'll have no idea what topic this is because the whole point of this is that it's not about the quality of your drawing, and I cannot stress that enough. I'm going to show you lots of examples to prove to you that drawing is not the point. But this is actually about cat carriers. So I'm going to move on because I can't cope with that one. So that was on cat carriers. And the point that I would have shown you, if that video hadn't been so jerky, is it's about picking up a pen and drawing something on the board. It's not about perfecting the layout and where things are going to go. And it's about that conversation, that creativity around, okay, how are we going to meet this goal, and how might we do this? And the process, and for those of you on Elearning Unlocked, you can watch the whole video. I do a little nitty voiceover for you. The process is wipe it off. It doesn't work. Okay, that's not going to work. Then we're going to loop round. And the actual module that we ended up with started completely different. That first person who picked up that pen started drawing, and that you can see it was Jen. Rosie then nipped in and started drawing some other slides. We then started drawing arrows all over the place to cope, but no, actually, we don't need that. We'll get rid of that. So the point of the whiteboard side of it is that it's dynamic. Anyone can pick up a pen and have a go, and if you don't like it, you just wipe it. I'm going to tell you a little story, but I've actually done this session deadly. I'm going to admit to you, I did a session for corporate. And I split the room into half. I'm on day 3, but I didn't split them on the basis of who they were. I just kind of separated them. And they only had a whiteboard like this and a flip chart. And the team that worked on the whiteboard, it was mad. I mean, I literally had people on chairs drawing on top of, the top of the whiteboard above the other people. You couldn't look at it and know what they were drawing, but they managed in the time that I set them to design the entire module. If you'd looked at it, you couldn't have built it. But again, that's good. That to me, that's success. It's about that communication of ideas, not about perfection of the drawing. The team that worked on the flip chart designed 2 slides. They looked amazing. They were beautifully drawn. Turned out one of them wasn't going to work at all, but they wanted to present that to the team because it's so good at drawing. It looked amazing. It was a picture of a car. They were very proud of it, but they'd already identified it wouldn't work. And so to me, I wish I'd videoed it because that is the summary of why the whiteboard works, because you're not feeling like you're committed. You draw it, you wipe it, you draw an arrow around. As soon as you start putting things on paper, you feel more invested in them. I think this is another good example of that. This actually works really well, but this is actually Jen having worked through on a whiteboard the ideas. So actually, yes, this does look quite good. You can tell it was my design. But by then we'd formulated the ideas. So this was about recording the ideas. But you can see here, sometimes people have legs, sometimes they don't. This one is a wall and different things are happening. But the point of the exercise is about that, we could go here and then it could go over to here and then, what's going to happen. And then we do include some notes just to remind ourselves of what's going to happen. I've included this image because this is a great way to design branching scenarios. So if you identify that actually, do you know what, it'd be great if we could have some sort of decision-making tree where, the learner's making a decision and then they see the impact of that decision rather than just getting straight feedback, then using post-it notes on a whiteboard will allow you to then say, okay, they made the decision and they branched off and this will take them over to this slide and so on. So this wasn't about designing the actual specific slide. This was actually designing the experience. we've talked about COVID. We have always done this live together. We have our own little design room with whiteboards on the wall, very similar to this. COVID hit and we had to pivot and learn how to be creative at our desk. Now, one of the rules that we have is that you can't use a PC while you're in that creative suite. We don't let anyone go down rabbit warrens of, oh, well, I found this image and then we could just, we want it to be in the room. We want people to be present. We encourage people don't use mobile phones either. So it was a big shift for us to have to then put people in front of the danger, which is the thing we're trying to get them to avoid, which is PCs. So we started using different tools. And so you can see that instantly what happened, people started bringing in screenshots because it was quicker than drawing. So the eventual module actually, it's probably in my top 10 favourites. It was a game show. Those of you that are older, I think probably the reason we put that picture in was because we had a designer who had no idea what blank to blank was. So we had to bring a screenshot in. He did know what Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was. I think that is not Snoopy. Martin, you'll be good at this sort of 70s humor.
Thank you.
Anyway, the point was, it is possible because I recognise that we have the luxury of coming together, but you might not. So it is possible, but I think do apply those rules as well. Try and keep people away from just kind of drifting off down into the internet, because the problem is, you can imagine I wanted to find the perfect blank-to-blank picture to, show them, and then, and then we had a laugh about it, and you kind of get off track really quickly. But this was the kind of ending result. And we used something called Sketchnote, which no longer exists in the world. But you can obviously do things with whiteboard in Teams, the sort of similar thing. So yeah. So I want you to have a go, but I recognise that we'll have different views on what e-learning looks like. We'll have different experiences and exposure to e-learning. So I'm very quickly going to run through some examples of e-learning in kind of groups, which will hopefully get you excited about what you could do, but also just kind of spark some ideas. So I'm not going to talk in too much detail about this because I really want you to do your activity. But we've already talked about storytelling and how powerful that is for us to, learn about people's experiences. So storytelling and scenarios are foundational elements of instructional design. Most of the instructional design models we've looked at in Elearning Unlocked have mentioned in some way the use of scenarios. So often that's about learning about something and then using that scenario that's very relevant to your organisation, and how do I apply that based on what I've learned. But the other thing that we do is we'll use stories to grab learners' attention. So in this example, you don't start your module with, the learning objectives and how to use the module, whatever. They go straight into a story because we want them to lean forward because we know they don't want to do this in learning. So it was we understood our learners, we knew the topic, and one of those things was they don't think it's relevant to them, they're not interested. So we don't want to take them down a traditional route of starting with the content because we already know that they're leaning back, they don't care. So the instant was the story, they went straight into the story so that we could grab them and pull them into what they were learning about. The other thing is, you can't see because I'm in the way, games and gamification. So using that as a technique to bring people through and engage them and excite them about the content. And so sometimes they're full games, so the whole module will be a game. So in this example, this was on compliance. Who wants to do a compliance training? Nobody. So you actually got to pick an avatar and you went through, and as they moved through the game, you got questions that you had to answer, and then you got feedback. So it was the experience was around games, but actually the questioning was around compliance. And this one was a full, the module was all about games, but sometimes it's just skills practices within the module itself. Obviously, we predominantly work with charities, so there is a lot of emotion around what we're doing, the topics that we're covering. So that's often an element, particularly you can see this one's for Save the Children. We will be bringing in some of that emotional aspects, but also it's about reflection. So what would you do in this situation? So people are typing in information. How would you grade how you're feeling about a particular topic? So you can use those things to get the learner to stop, think, reflect, and then often in things like this, we'll show them that at the end. So in this situation, what would you do? You learn about what you should be doing, and then at the end, okay, now I've got this reflective practice that I said I would do this, but now I've learned I shouldn't do that, I should do this. Or it might be that they've learned that they were right all along and they're fine. When we think about e-learning, we often think of it from the perspective of giving information, and that's okay, there's a place for that. But you can also do things like let the learner interact with data. So this was a module which was really full of data. It was basically about maths to do a calculation for a humanitarian response. So we taught them information, but then we let them have a go. So there was practices in terms of what they might be doing. Just to quickly mention, I probably should explain why there's a slide on heroin. This was a module that we did for Public Health Wales, and it is genuinely for people who are using recreational drugs on how to do that safely. So if you're interested in some of the key terms that are used to describe heroin by users, there is your learning for the day. And then obviously you can use menus, but a menu doesn't just have to be a list. Sometimes that's what you need. But also it can be about orientating a learner where they are in a journey. So that's a process. Or it might be actually about reinforcing something. So this is about reducing the barriers in terms of inclusion. So the learner gets to remove those barriers by learning about them, and then the character steps over and joins, it becomes more inclusive. So that menu can be quite a creative element of your module as well. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of flag with you is this concept of allowing the learner to build their own resource, their own takeaway. So in an example like this one, we're giving them the takeaway that they can then complete themselves. So that's a downloadable Word document, so they can type in and make their own notes and answer questions within the document. But in an example like this, they're building it themselves. So this is for children who have got FASD. And what they're doing is they're identifying things that work for them. So I like fidget spinners. I like to be given verbal instructions. They drag and drop them into their backpack, and then they get a printable resource that they can then take to school and show their teacher, I've learned that this is what I need, and now I would like you to help me in terms of providing those. So you can create things that the learner builds themselves that then becomes really tangible, useful for them afterwards. So you're about to do something, I promise. I wanted to just flag up these rules. These are the rules that we use within our own organisation. And so I'm going to come round and check on you to make sure that you're following not all of these, but the general idea. And the point is, when you're suggesting something, you're going to be a bit like this when I first start. But when you're suggesting something, listen to each other. If you want to, if you've got an idea, just draw it. If it doesn't work, just wipe it. No one will worry. Be open to that expressive experience, but also don't get hung up on something. If it's not working, just wipe it off and move on. Sometimes ideas come and then they don't work, and then we just move on, and you need to move on quickly. And build on the idea of others. Someone will draw something, and this happens all the time. I'm terrible. People will look at my drawing, interpret it into be completely different, and their idea is better than what I was planning to draw in the first place. And that's fine too. So, just build on each other's ideas. So I would like you, so we've got this whiteboard here. We've got this one here. We've got enough for 2 groups of table. We're going to give you some topics. Now, you haven't had the kickoff meeting, so you can make up the answer to what you're going to do. But we have given you a measurable goal. We have said to you what we would like you, what you should be aiming towards. But you don't have any source. That's even better, because you can really be creative and come up with anything you like. If as a group you say, none of these topics I'll ever be involved in, but I would love to do one on self-harm, then feel free. We'd love to see that. So what I'd like you to do is have a discussion about what your overall approach will be. Are you going to do a game? Are you going to do scenario-based module? Draw 5 slides if you can. And again, don't worry what they're going to look like, although we are going to come and have a look at them. But don't worry. And then be prepared to just give us a little, I've said 1 minute because I want to keep it short. Just give us a little summary. We did this. We've come up with this. This is what we'd like to do. What I'd like to do is leave them on the whiteboards. We're going to post your team names, and then what we want to do is to use Minty for you to vote on the one that you think is the best. And there is a prize. Don't know what it is yet. We've got some. I'm feeling the mugs. High stakes here. High stakes. So Jen is going to give you a team name, number, and I'm going to hand out the activities. But as I've said, move about. This is your time. Amber has asked me to remind you, only use whiteboard pens on the whiteboards. You're all L&D professionals. You know the dangers of whiteboards. So just as you're all moving back and settling in, did you enjoy that? Yeah. Did you ever enjoy designing e-learning before in that way? It's fun, right? Yeah. And what you produce is better for the fun that you have along the way. So, yeah, I really hope that that was a kind of an emotional experience that you can then see the benefit of and take that forward.
Jill, what do you find is your minimal number of people? That's our big issue. It's very often one person. So you don't have that kind of balance.
Absolutely. So 2 would be my minimum. I'm going to pick up on the point about there only being 1. The other issue is too many. So 4 or 5 is okay. More than that, and then you just spend the whole time explaining things to each other, because that's the other thing, is that it's a journey, and I put you under pressure, but sometimes you can go off on your journey in terms of creativity and you can leave people behind. They might not understand what the concept, or they might be stuck, or they might be uncomfortable with it. So it is, in our rule set, it is about taking people with you on that journey. And we have this rule: don't panic. If you are a bit lost, it's okay, just stay calm, just keep trying to engage with it. We have a particular problem because Jen and I have worked together for 10 years, and we finish each other's sentences, and it's a bit of a joke in the office. So we can design things with sometimes barely any words. We'll just sort of go, we could do, and she's like, oh yeah, we could, what if we had the, and then, oh yeah, we could do like the thing we did before. And so, yeah. In terms of when you're on your own, it's not always logistically possible, but trying to bring someone in, like the stakeholder, the expert in, that's another idea. And we do that with clients. So there'll be particular topics where we might say, okay, the subject matter expert's particularly interested in the process and being involved, so we'll do it with them. Sometimes it could just be trading favours with other people who say, look, I could help you with that meeting if you then come and help me with this. If it all doesn't work and you can't find anyone, or particularly with the kind of remote working, the other thing that I would recommend is doing it on your own and then showcasing it to somebody else. Because what you'll get is their feedback. So we had a prime example. We needed something built. No one was available in terms of design. I did it on my own. I actually hand drew them after this. I laid it all out on the table. I talked it through with someone and they were like, yeah, but it would be better if we did this and if we did that first. And so it was a shorter process than if I'd done it with them, but I still had lots of changes and it was very powerful in terms of, I think the other thing is, when you just describe something, you realise it might not work, or, you kind of answer your own questions. So that process of talking somebody through sometimes is enough, is okay. Jen?
Tapping into CLC and obviously the support that you get as charities and kind of working together, like if you've got similar topics that are things that another charity are doing, try to kind of possibly do that with them, because we're all fundamentally fire safety. It's got that fundamental content, and then obviously there's organisational specific stuff. So that's a really great way to potentially come together and do that design session together online.
Or trade the time. You've got one on self-harm and I've got one on fire. You help me and then I'll help you. And so that's something that we can.
I'm sorry, just to really open back that, I know it was just at the time, on a really practical note, buy a little whiteboard. If you're working at home or if your office space, you don't have the luxury of a big whiteboard, buy it yourself.
We just bought a little stack off Amazon and we use those as well. And we use those when we're sat with a developer as well, where we're kind of sketching out really how it's going to work, not just kind of what our idea was. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what about using ChatGPT as a thought companion?
ChatGPT is a whole section in Elearning Unlocked and AI in general. Yes, when we were putting together these and Jen said we better have some ideas in our backup, the first thing she did was put that into ChatGPT and asked it for treatment ideas. And so that's, if you are stuck, that's an option to take forward in general. And Jen's going to finish my sentence.
Sometimes they can be a bit generic. That's the only thing that, like, without a doubt, there's 5 kind of key themes that ChatGPT brings up as common themes that you'll use. So, like, it's great as a starting point, but sometimes it can just be a bit repetitive. So you just have to be a bit careful. Like, use it as a starting point and then obviously go from there.
Right, Amber's going to throw me out if I don't get on with this now. Okay, I don't need to go through that. I've done all that. Okay, so you've done your designs. My next tip would be to write them down in some form as quickly as possible, because we record it, we take photographs of all of it, but if you leave that and don't come back to it for 2 days, then you'll be looking at it like, what was I thinking? What does that mean? Why am I over there, not there now? So we have a concept of a design sheet. You can do this digitally. So you can take a photograph, put it in PowerPoint, write a little description, and then you've kind of created a little mini storyboard. But on the theme of continuing to do this in this kind of physical way, not on your computer yet, we have these design sheets. I will put a template in the digital goodie bag for you, so you're absolutely welcome to take them forward and use them for yourself. But the point is that you've got your module name at the top, you've got a little space to redraw your drawing, some information, and then we just kind of, what were we thinking, how will it work, what would happen, and sometimes there's some notes for us to our developers and what they should be doing. And then quite literally, you stack all those up, you put a big bulldog clip over it, and when you get into your authoring tool, you sit next to it with that and you go, right, now I need to build this, right, now I need to build that. The other thing is, if you're working with stakeholders, you might want to engage with them to get their feedback. Obviously for us, we're then presenting this to a client. If I sent them the hand drawings, they'd probably be concerned about who they've contracted. So that's for us internally. But if you now need to go externally from your team to a stakeholder, then we also have a concept of a module outline, which, if you remember back to my diagram at the start, that was the next step in this process. Again, we'll give you the template for this, so we're very happy for you to reuse it. But the point is that here, what you're doing is describing what's happening, and then you might include some graphics in there to support it. But it's a much easier thing then for the subject matter expert to look through and give feedback on. So in terms of my takeaways, make sure you start with a goal. If you'd started with the source, you'd all have the same fire safety, because it would all be based on the source, but you wouldn't have the fun creativity that you've all come up with, and they're all different. Work with others where you can, we mentioned. Create a space for creativity, and I mean a physical space, i.e. if you're working at home, maybe go to the dining room away from the office, unless the dining room is your office. Then go to the garden unless it's raining. But find a space. But if you're working with others, find a psychologically safe place as well. If you say, I want to do it on a bus, and the person goes, well, that's a stupid idea, then all creativity is going to cease. So you need to create an agreement between you that anything's open, we can just have fun, and it might not be right, and that's okay. I gave you a timed thing because of the logistics of this. That's not a safe space because you're already under pressure and you're not going to be your most creative at that stage, although you might have just sat and talked if I hadn't done that. So again, that's part of that, creating that space. And then make sure you record your output, because that is not going to get you a design at the end because you won't remember all the things, but the design of each of those definitely will. So we're going to do the vote over lunch. I hope this doesn't put anyone in too much trauma. We haven't quite got that far in the election to be that distressed by it. Any questions? I'm going to say, can you grab me at lunch so that I can get you to lunch? And the last thing I want to say is that the other thing that we're doing is we're running a podcast alongside Elearning Unlocked. It's on all platforms, it's free. You don't have to be on Elearning Unlocked to look at it. So if you're interested, you can scan that code, and it's a bit of a niche market. It's just charities and it's just content creation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm just going to turn this off. I mean, I love you, but...